Okay, so the next landmark that we're going to come up to is Independence Rock. Independence Rocks is so cool because it has thousands of names inscribed on it. Some of them you'll recognize. Bonneville, as in the guy the lake's named after. Yep. Fremont, as in John C. Fremont. Brigham Young, all of that. So what Independence Rock was, it was like this magical marker that turned into like this big rock yearbook. So if you happen to have any ancestors who walked across the plains during this time, before, after, or just around this time, chances are is their name is etched in onto this rock. It became just sincerely the yearbook of the people who did this trail, which is so cool. The really exciting part about this is it meant that they were really close to South Pass. Now, I've kind of alluded to how important South Pass was before, but here's where it becomes really important. So South Pass is this place that has a natural break in the Rocky Mountains. So I want you to imagine if you had to take a wagon and hike all the way to Bear Lake with a wagon. Think about that road as it goes through, especially there at the end, like before you hit Beaver Mountain, when you go on that big edge of the cliff. There would be no road there for you. How would you get there? That's how all of the mountains are through these Rocky Mountains. So to have South Pass, these pictures that you're seeing here, that's like South Pass. So it still has a lot of up and down. It doesn't mean that it's going to be like this nice flat spot, but it's not going to have giant cliffs. So you can get your wagon through it. You can get a whole team of oxen through it without having to worry about falling off a cliff, which is awesome. So after South Pass, then you would come to this place called Fort Bridger. We talked about Fort Bridger before. Jim Bridger is in the Mountain Man. After he wasn't there in the mountains catching beaver anymore, he opened up Fort Bridger and used it as a trading post for any immigrants who were heading west. This is the fort that the Mormons bought in 1853 because essentially the only people using this post were Mormons. There were some people along the Oregon Trail who would come and use it and then continue on, but the vast majority of them were Mormons. So they bought it so that they could help these people and not have to charge them so much so that they could get there and be there. So Fort Bridger becomes really important, and it goes straight into the Mormons' collection of buildings, of things that they own, it becomes theirs. Okay, so next up we have Immigration Canyon. Immigration Canyon is 1,283 miles from Nauvoo. This is a big, big deal because this is the final canyon you have to go through to get to Salt Lake City. Now, when this first group went through, they didn't know that Salt Lake is where they were leaving, but as more groups went, obviously they knew where the end goal was. So they go there. They had to hack their way through bushes and trees. It took about 4 hours for them to get through. Before that, it was carved out by the Donner Party. Remember how I told you they spent 18 days building a road through a canyon? It was this canyon. Okay, so it still took them 4 hours to get through it before they could get through, which should tell you how much work the Donner Party put into it. But that was the last one. Then we reached the Salt Lake Valley. This picture is one of my favorites because it shows you how crazy the work is to get through there. How they had to go through these little tiny places, and if they had a fat wagon, then sorry, that's not really going to work well for them. Okay, now we're in the Salt Lake Valley. This is some of the scenes that we see today of what the valley is like. Okay, but would be similar, I mean, minus the houses and buildings and inversion, but this would be similar to what they see. So at this point, the guy who had taken over as the head of the church, is the president of the church, their prophet, his name's Brigham Young. Brigham Young was actually sick at the end of the trip. And so when they got to this point, he kind of sits up because he was riding in the back of the wagon. He looks up and then he says this infamous line. He says, "This is the place." Okay, so that's why we have this place called This is the Place Monument. Okay, so Immigration Canyon. Have you guys been to This is the Place Monument? I know sometimes they go there in 4th grade. It is right across the street from Hogle Zoo, which you go to in 3rd grade. So right there, if you keep going on that road past the zoo, and this is the place, that's Immigration Canyon, which is obviously different than what it was back then. But that's the landmark. That's supposed to be like the exact spot where he was at when he told the people, this is it. This is where we're going to stay. And I'm going to tell you one more story about it because this is going to become important here in a little bit when we keep studying it farther. At this point in time, Brigham Young has a dream. And in this dream, he is told by God that if him and his people are able to stay in one place for 10 years, that they will not have to move ever again. So if they can just stay and last in one place without getting pushed out by mobs or by people who hate them or whatever the reason is, 10 years is the magic number. If they can stay there for 10 years, then they'll be there forever. Okay? So I want you to keep that in mind. That's going to become really important for some reactions that we have coming down the line and some events that happen down the line. Okay. So we've talked about how they get from New York clear to Salt Lake. There's a group of people that we didn't really talk about much that I want to talk about here for a second. It's the kids. Okay, so this church is not just a whole huge group of adults. This is a whole huge group of families that include kids. So now we've got these kids who are going with them and walking 1,283 miles from Nauvoo to Salt Lake City. And the question is what in the world do they do? So I want you to imagine, right now it's kind of easy to imagine being stuck with your family all day because you are. But I want you to think, what if I was stuck with my family all day, plus I had to walk around 20 miles a day? What would that be like? Would your little siblings be like, I'm so bored. I don't want to do this anymore. So what's some of the things that they did? They would make little dolls, first of all. So that first picture, you can see their little dolls. Those ones have like fancier faces than they would have had, but they would make like little straw dolls. They would also sing and sing and sing and sing some more. So imagine that favorite song that gets stuck in a little sibling or a little kid's head that they just sing over and over and over and over again for 1,283 miles. Okay? Next, they would take little jars of milk and cream and they would shake it. All day when they walked, they would shake it. The thing that would do is by the time, if you add a little bit of salt into it, at the end of the day, when you stop to have butter, that cream will have turned into butter. And so you can have a little bit of a treat with your little flour biscuits and you can have butter. So they would do that. Another thing that they would do is they would stick a piece of wood in the spoke of the wagon tire and count it. And every time it made one complete circle, it was like an odometer in a vehicle. They'd be able to tell you how far you went based off of how many circles it went past. So they would have little tricks like that. So kids would do all sorts of things to stay busy. Okay, so before you go and take this quiz, and remember this is going to be at least a 2-day project for you, right? To listen to all of this and take the quiz. You need to be able to tell me the order that everything went in. I want you to be able to tell me what persecution is. I want you to be able to tell me what happened to the 2 temples that they built. I want you to be able to tell me what dangers they faced once they started hiking and on the Pioneer Trail. I want you to be able to tell me what's so special about Independence Rock and South Pass. And I also want you to tell me what is it that Brigham Young said there at the end. And I'll give you a hint, there's a giant monument there. Okay, then also I want you to be able to tell me about the kids and what they did while they were hiking here. If you don't know the answer to those, go find it before you take the quiz, and then we will start on our next big project later this week, and I am so excited for it. As always, email me if you have any questions, and I hope you guys have a great day. Stay safe.